All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Road to Run webinar. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. I know that people are still logging on and getting used to it. A couple housekeeping items as you're logging on. Go ahead and scroll your cursor over the bottom of your screen. We're all pretty familiar with Zoom at this point, but you want to open up your chat and make sure that the to line says to all participants and attendees. That way, when you're using the chat throughout today, you can make sure everyone knows what you're saying. We also have captions available, but as we get started, again, put to all panelists and attendees on your chat to line, and go ahead and let us know where you're joining us from today. I know that we're focusing on New Mexico, but we're a nationwide virtual audience, so I'd love to hear where you're joining us from. We'll get started in about a minute just to give people time to log on. Oh, we got Ohio and Missouri. Okay, our first couple people are joining us from outside New Mexico. We've got California, we've got Massachusetts. This is why I love to do this piece. It's so fun to gather women from all across the country to talk about these leadership components, to consider running for office together. I love being able to see what's going on in the chat, and I hope that you'll make some good connections there today. We got people from Kentucky, we got people from North Carolina, from Maryland, from Texas, more from Ohio. I'm very excited to have everyone here today. Again, we're going to be hearing from two lovely ladies in New Mexico, but with this nationwide audience, you can build connection absolutely anywhere at any time. So we're about 2 minutes past the hour. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with the housekeeping items and get us all ready to go and have a successful webinar today. So you want to make sure again that those of you who just joined, go ahead and open your chat and make sure that the to line says to all participants and attendees. And if you want to, go ahead and let us know where you're joining us from. I also wanted to let you know that at the end of this session, there's going to be a short evaluation. It'll take you maybe 3 minutes to complete. So be sure to take time to give us that feedback. We want to make sure that these webinars are as useful for you as possible. So if you can give us that feedback at the end. There is also closed captioning available for you on today's webinar. So if you scroll over the bottom of your screen and you see that closed caption sign, that CC sign at the bottom of your screen, you can go ahead and turn that on and have captions available for you, or there is a stream text link available in the chat. When we get to the Q&A portion of today, instead of using the chat, I'll ask that you use the Q&A feature. It's also there at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a little chat box. So when you want to ask some questions of our speakers, go ahead and use that, and I'll make sure that all of our questions, or as many as we have time for, get asked to our speakers today. So you joined us because you wanted to be part of our Road to Run series. This is our second stop on the series. The first one was focusing on leadership, and this one we are focusing on fundraising and networking. And you might be thinking to yourself, why is She Should Run doing this? I'm really excited, but what is it for? She Should Run is a national nonprofit that focuses on dramatically increasing the number of women who are considering a run for office. So we like to tap into all those different barriers, concerns, questions that women across the country might have that are keeping them from pursuing this opportunity. We especially love our Road to Run series because we invite women who have actually done it to pull back the curtain and give you some answers to what they did that worked, what they learned from, any scary stories along the way, so that when you pursue your run for office, you're a little bit more prepared. So other pieces, if you have not been familiar with She Should Run before, we have a community of 27,000 women. We engage in a variety of this same type of instruction in that online format. You can get resources, worksheets, build community, take quizzes. So if this is something that you're super interested in, we suggest you check out that community and invest in it a little bit more so that you can better understand what is possible as you consider a run for office. Finally, in this Road to Run series, like I mentioned, it is our second stop. Our third and fourth stops are going to be communications and finding your own path. So be sure to follow along so you can get the complete benefit of this series. Speaking of the benefit of the series, it really comes down to the guest speakers that we invite to come in and speak to you, to be candid about their experiences. And I have the phenomenal pleasure of introducing you to City Councilwoman Tessa Abeyta-Stuve and State Representative Georgene Lewis. We'll hear from them in just a moment, but to give a brief overview, Tessa Abeyta-Stuve is a native New Mexican who was raised in Los Alamos, New Mexico, home of the Los Alamos National Laboratory. In 2019, Tessa was elected to the Las Cruces City Council, serving as a district that includes residential and business communities, as well as the main city hospitals. Before serving as a city councilor, Tessa was an advocate for the child advocacy centers, where she was instrumental in helping pass legislation to place the CACs in the statute. Tessa also worked to secure funding for them and for the New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs. Tessa has served on numerous boards, including the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce, Reproductive Justice statewide organization, Bold Futures, the local emergency planning committee, and the parent-teacher organization of her children's elementary school. State Representative Georgene Lewis is an attorney and 5-term state representative from New Mexico. Currently, she serves as general counsel for, I'm really tongue twisted today, as general counsel for the Pueblo of Tesuque. Am I saying that correctly? Tesuque. I am not familiar with New Mexico areas, apparently. And as a justice at the Pueblo de San Ildefonso Supreme Court. Georgene chairs the House State Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee and co-chairs the Interim Indian Affairs Committee. Georgene was raised on the Pueblo of Acoma Reservation. She is the secretary of the National Caucus of Native American State Legislators and sits on the board of directors for the National Caucus of Legislators from Gaming States. Georgene also recently ran in a special election for New Mexico's congressional vacancy that is a result of the confirmation of Deb Haaland as the Secretary of the Department of Interior. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll pass it over to them. We'll hear from Tessa first. And I'm so excited for you all to be able to learn from these ladies. Again, if you have specific questions for them, be sure to use the Q&A box. So with that, I'll hand it to you, Tessa.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. As said, my name is Tessa Abeyta-Stuve, and it is a privilege to serve as a Las Cruces City Councilor. My district represents one of the most diverse areas in our city, including our hospital systems, as mentioned before, aged neighborhoods, historic communities, and surrounds New Mexico State University. As a first-generation college attendee, I had a very specific plan for myself, which did not include running for office, but rather I was hoping to work in local government where a steady income, healthcare, and the possibility to retire before 80 might be possible. See, growing up, I have a rare congenital heart defect, and I've had multiple open heart surgeries. And knowing that I will need more in the future, I just wanted to have a stable, reliable career. But life has other plans. During my college experience, I met my spouse and became pregnant with twins. I had to take time off as I cared for premature twins while recovering from congestive heart failure. And it took me about 6.5 years to graduate after the boys were born. They were about 2 years old. I ended up having to stay home with them because the cost of childcare was outweighing the income I could make. And we completed our family 5 years later with the addition of our daughter. I love most aspects of motherhood, with the exception of online schooling. Right now, that is not my forte, but motherhood often was very isolating for me, and I still wanted to participate in my community. And so I started attending forums just to listen, volunteering in different spaces as my church, with the school, all the while carting my trio along with me. It was after I spoke at an event encouraging equity and inclusion at a Halloween carnival that I was approached by a person who was a former city councilor and now a current state representative. And it led to a conversation that would be my first ask to run for city council. And this was an ask that I would turn down. See, after I spoke with this individual, I was very excited, but I felt very unprepared. And I continued to have that nervousness over one specific issue, and that was of finances and fundraising. Our family was one that was living very near paycheck to paycheck, and with two individuals that had severe medical conditions, I did not want to jeopardize the little family safety that we had. But in my heart, I knew that this idea of perhaps representing my community stuck. And even unintentionally, I had been building upon my leadership skills. So I continued to stay involved and looked at other ways that I could become more active, knowing that if I was going to ask my community to trust in me and invest in me, then I would need to invest in my community first. I became a campaign treasurer for our state rep and now a dear friend, where I was able to learn the logistical aspects of what was required to run a successful campaign. And I also accepted a job as a lobbyist with a diverse clientele list, all of which were issues that I was very passionate about. And this position was much more than just policy driven, but included that securing of funds. So every day I was working and asking to have these programs funded and kind of getting that fear out of my system about asking for money. And eventually was able to help secure over $2 million for places like our child advocacy centers and the New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Service Programs. It was while I was advocating at our state capitol that I found out that the current city councilor in my district was going to be vacating the office. And as I was working on bringing resources back to my community, I found a common theme, and that was voices like mine in the phase that I was at in life were rarely at the table at the formation of policies, which was a really big disservice, especially when looking at municipal issues. And so as I was gaining these skills and I was able to bring these resources and policies back from a state level to my community, I began to wonder what type of impact might I have if I was able to serve at that local level. And so when I returned, I had to have a deep conversation with my family on what it would look like to run. I began my campaign by getting a campaign manager and working on a plan utilizing all that knowledge that I had been gaining over the last few years. We were also starting a new voting system at the same time, ranked choice voting. And so I knew that I was going to have to bring not only my message to the constituents, but education on making sure that they were confident with this new system of voting. I had 3 strong male opponents, one of which who was a former city councilor and who had great name recognition. But with an incredible team, lots of hard work and planning, I was elected to serve, becoming the first female city councilor to serve while raising school-aged children. And it's such a great honor to be able to share my story and answer questions with you all today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to reiterate one piece in particular, that when we want our communities to invest in us as candidates, when invest in us as leaders, we have to be keyed in on how we're investing in them, and that's a prerequisite to these types of things. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We'll hear more from you in a moment, and we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Georgene. We'll hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thanks to She Should Run. You guys are a great organization, and I'm glad that people are listening in today. If you are interested in running, even if it's just something in the back of your head, the conversations are always good to keep in mind. And with that, I will share with you my story. So I grew up on the Pueblo of Acoma Reservation. It's very rural. It's around 60 miles west of Albuquerque. And growing up on the tribal reservation, leadership roles are traditionally reserved for men. So in thinking about how I could serve my community, I figured that going to law school and becoming a lawyer would be one way. And so I announced that to my family and to my community, and I was encouraged to pursue that goal. However, I became pregnant when I was a sophomore in high school, and really deterred kind of my thinking about my plans for the future. But now I, have this beautiful daughter that I knew I had to provide a better life for. So she was just a bigger motivation for me to continue my education. And so I did all that. I became a lawyer. And in my role as a baby lawyer, I came across an organization that trained women to run for office. And so this was in 2010. And I started the program thinking that, okay, you know, in 15, 20 years, when I returned to living on the Pueblo of Acoma, because I currently live in Albuquerque, and at that time I lived in Albuquerque, when I moved back home, then I would run for office. So that was 2010. And again, just the way things occur, in 2012, 2 years later, because of redistricting, there was a new seat created in the legislature on the west side of Albuquerque, which is House District 26, the district that I currently serve. And people were talking to me about running for office. And even though I figured that I would do it later in life, you know, there's just a time and a place for things to happen. And I talked to my family, I talked to friends, especially those friends that are politically engaged and really knew that I was in a good position to run for office. I also knew that I could commit to the work that it takes to running for office. So I started a campaign, and in trying to balance everything, also, I know Tessa mentioned this, is that in New Mexico, our legislature is unpaid. So not only was I campaigning and taking away from my current job, but I knew that if I actually won the seat, that I would also be losing money, and that would mean also some time away from my family and friends. But in the end, you know, just trying to balance all that was something that I knew I wanted to do, because as cliche as it sounds, I really wanted to make a difference. And knowing that in the state of New Mexico, where 11% of the population is Native American, but that wasn't reflected in our state legislature, I just felt that I have that obligation to serve, had that obligation to be a voice for Native American women, for single moms, for people with my lived experiences. And even though it's a lot of sacrifice at the end of the day, when you think about it, I'm one of 70 people in the state that sits in the House of Representatives chamber, making decisions about our families and our communities and our future. And this is something that I'm just really privileged and honored to be a part of. I'm so happy to serve my community, even though, you know, sometimes it's exhausting and frustrating, but you know, thinking broadly, it's something that I love doing. And yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions as we move along, and really look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And Tessa, we'll have you come back. I told y'all who are here today, we don't play with our speakers. We have two incredible women, incredible stories, and we are all so lucky to be able to hear from the advice they'll be sharing with us today. And I just want to again thank both of you for your candor, for your vulnerability, for your bravery, for all the things that you bring to your life, and specifically to representing your communities in elected office. This has been incredible, even just to start us off. So as I mentioned at the beginning, today's topic is on fundraising, and in particular, how networking can be a vehicle for fundraising. And at She Should Run, we're always talking about how critical your network is to your success. No one leads in a vacuum. It's a team sport to get this type of work done. So as we get started, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how were your networks essential to your fundraising efforts as you were running for office? And we'll just kind of go in the same order for now. Tessa, we'll start with you, and then Georgene.
Great, thank you for the question. Networks are vital for any part of fundraising. And what I learned is, originally I said, I don't know anybody, I have no network. And what I wasn't realizing, that all the connections that I was making, those from just the other moms on the playground, different types of communities that I was working at, those are all networks. And so you're able to build upon those. And while you might have some people, especially for the phase of life that I was in, I didn't have a lot of friends that were potential large donors. They were all little ones, but what they did have were different communities they were a part of. And so we often had house parties where they would invite their neighbors to hear me to speak. And we would get smaller donations in from that, which really make a difference. Lots of little donations make a difference. And then potentially, if you had other people that were able to donate on larger bits, that would help. And so it's so important to recognize that. And that's the piece where I was saying before, you need to really invest in your community ahead of time and really get to know who they are. And you'll find that your network is actually much more expanded than you might realize.
Yeah, I love that you remind us, right, that there's so much more than just like the person who's going to come and give you $5,000. There's the person who's going to give you $10. There's the person who's going to open their home. There's the person who's going to say, hey, I may not have any money, but I know 100 friends who would listen to you, and I'm happy to share your information with them. Those are huge things to bring up. Georgene, we'll hear the same question from you.
So networking is really just, everyone that you've ever talked to. You can go back to, who you went to school with in high school or even elementary school, if you've maintained those friendships or connections, those people in your Facebook friends, but really looking towards, those people in the PTA or your colleagues or your college friends. Really, everyone out there, I think, would be incredibly happy to hear about the things that are going on, especially when they involve your political involvement. And I know that, when I first started and trying to see who I might reach out to help me, it was really just kind of, going through the database of everyone that I've ever met to see how they can help. And I think now, especially with social media, putting it out there, announcing that you are running for a certain position, you would be surprised at how much support you'll receive, and then how those people that support you could also bring in their networks. And so I, learned that when I was recently running for the congressional seat, is that, just putting it out there, and people on nationally would be friends with me, and then they would bring in their connections. So I think really announcing that this is something that you're interested in doing, this is something that you're going to strive for, you'll be super surprised at how much support you will receive.
I love that too. I love that for what you started with, that networking is really just all about relationships. I think so much we get caught up in like networking is showing up in a business suit at a professional luncheon and handing out a business card, when really it's about investing in the people that we know, being honest about the things that we want to pursue and asking them to invest in those things with us. So you both kind of talked a bit about the networks that seem really right at the front rank, the things that we're most likely to think of as we're running for office. But I'm curious, and Georgene, you kind of got into this a little bit about how we start to expand that. So certainly social media is an option, but when you're looking to say, okay, like these are the people I know and these are the people they know, how do you start to build your network beyond that? And what suggestions would you have there? And we'll go in reverse order this time. Georgene, I'll have you go first.
Yeah, so I mean, again, when I first ran for office in 2012, I reached out to some of my friends, and one of them invited me to dinner, and she was just so happy that I was running for office. And I didn't realize how politically involved both her and her husband were at the time. And we talked about the campaign and what I was planning to do. And at the end of the dinner, she gave me a list of like various organizations with contact people that she thought might support me. And basically she said, call every one of these people, tell them who you are and what you're doing, and ask for their support. So even little things like that, if you have friends that are able to put you in touch with those people that are going to support you or that look to support people like you. That's something that I was just super amazed. And then I started calling people and was able to get some great support that way. So not just, the financial support of them donating to my campaign, but also advice on what to do and what meetings to go to and how to meet other people. So I found that really useful and really always just looking to ask for help, because people will give you advice and they'll tell you who to talk to and where to go.
Yeah, I love this. And I think that it's really important to highlight that you don't have to have all of the answers as a candidate, that it's okay to have people within your network who are like, you know what, I know this group of people, let me put you in there. Or, hey, have you thought about doing it this way, and giving a suggestion on process. That being open to that type of support is exactly about what running for office is about. And that we can accept that we don't have to be perfection in every element of this all by ourselves, that it takes this whole body of people to move us forward. So Tessa, is there anything you would add to that about how to grow your network outside of that initial first rung of people who are a little closer to you?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate Representative Lewis's comments on this, and it leads to, I was also, didn't have a great network, but what I was, and I mentioned it before, I was a campaign treasurer. And from that, I had met a really wonderful campaign manager. We developed a really good relationship. And so when I was running, I contacted her. I said, hey, I want you to be my campaign manager too, if possible. And she also had connections within her group. And she knew individuals that liked supporting causes, because if she said, and this was really important for myself to know, that it's not necessarily always about you as a person, but it's about the policies and the values that you're going to bring into the position. And so she was able to connect me with certain individuals within my own district. And from there, just like Representative Lewis said, they had lists of people they knew. And I literally got drug around a neighborhood one afternoon, going door to door, meeting new people just to get those connections. And from that, you also get invitations, you get funding as well. And so it really builds up in those specific ways.
Absolutely. I love what you mentioned too. What we can get really caught up in that fundraising moment, be like, oh, I'm asking for $100 for me. It's not for you. It's for the vision that you represent. It's for the policies that you're going to fight for. It's for the work that you're going to get done on behalf of the people that you represent. And I think it's really important for us to own that representation, to own that we are here to fight for the people that we're representing, and that our job is to get them committed to that mission and invested in that mission with us. Excellent. So there are so many questions. Our Q&A box is just on fire right now. So I'm going to get through as many of these as possible. Because of that, I'll probably just pitch a question to one of you at a time. And then if there's additional comments, I'll let you both add. So the first one is a really tactical question that we get quite a lot. And that is, how did you determine your fundraising goals? And actually, Georgene, because you've ran for a variety of offices, I'll start with you first. How did you go about determining, okay, this is how much I need to raise for this office that I'm running for?
Yeah, so basically I had like ABC budgets. So based on the amount of fundraising we were able to obtain, the big platter would be the A budget, and then mid-level was B, and then, not so great C. Really trying to organize what you're going to spend on a campaign manager and a campaign team. Also, what you're going to spend on printing services. A lot of times that's what a majority of the funding is spent towards. And I think also informing those people that you're asking for contributions to let them know what the money's going to be spent on really helps them to understand, oh yeah, in order to get our message across, we have to send 3 mailers, or, this is what we're doing, we're having an event. So basically setting a budget and making sure you keep with it. But if you're able to overcome that first, let's say you start with your C budget. If you're able to overcome that C budget, then you can move on to your B budget and be able to expand that way. So it's looking at the numbers, making sure that you have enough there, and really just being able to prioritize your fundraising efforts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like what you said there about being transparent. This is where this money is going, especially when there's such a stigma that like politicians are dirty and they're taking your money and being bad with it. To be able to say, I'm taking your money and this is what I'm doing. I'm promoting this policy and I'm going to have to do these mailers to make that happen, or I'm going to have to host this event to make that happen. And you're a part of that movement. I think that there's so much power in investing people in being part of what you represent. Tessa, is there anything you would add to that, or do you want us to go to the next question?
No, I think that covered it very well. Thanks.
Awesome. So then the next question we have, and I really appreciate the person who asked this. Most of these are coming in as anonymous, but this is something that I worry about when I think about running for office is, okay, I like get all brave and I do this like I dial a new number and I ask for money and they tell me no, and it's devastating. What do you do when someone tells you no as you've asked them to donate? So because we just heard from you, Georgene, we'll go with you first, Tessa, for this one.
Thank you. I appreciate this question because I had perhaps one of the worst experiences, I'll say, in my life doing this, but learning from that, I think, is so well. I had to actually travel to Albuquerque, and I live in Las Cruces, that's 3 hours away, for a person who I thought was going to be a supporter, and they had asked to speak with me about stuff. And in the end, I was told to just work harder, that finances were not necessary. And that can be crushing. How do you work with that? How do you do that? And so thank you for the time. Thank you for the discussion. And then I went back home and I went to a new event and I talked to some people around me and I said, hey, is there any organization that is doing a candidate forum? Or is there anything like that? And we pivot and you go there. And I went late in the game because I was traveling back. I had my daughter in tow. So she went up as I spoke and she was hanging off my leg. But in the end, after I sat back down, a lady came up next to me and she handed me a check. And she said, thank you so much for showing up and thank you for trying to represent. And so what you can do is, it's very hard and there are not always going to be wonderful moments, but pivoting and learning and knowing that you are there to represent certain people and you will get their support. And sometimes you just have to move on.
Yeah, I feel for that. That is my biggest fear, that rejection when you're putting yourself out there, because for me, it would take so much guts to do it. And I think what you illustrated is such a wonderful way to handle it. And if everyone will permit me just a second, I'll just add to that a bit, is I think there are two strategies that are really helpful for this. Is one, if this is an individual, they might not be able to donate. That might not be financially possible for them. But there's always an opportunity to do a follow-up and say, okay, that's fine if you can't donate. Is there someone you could introduce me to? Or is there a place where could I send you to my website and would you share it on social media, or something to move your cause forward? Don't accept the first no as point blank no forever. There might be another way to invest them. And the second, if you're dealing with something like Tessa shared and there's this larger conversation and then it ends in a no, I'm a big believer in the 5 whys. Okay, so this person tells you to work harder and that finances aren't actually a part of your success. Well, why do you believe that? Let me explain this. And then they give you an answer. And why is that so? And getting down to the crux of it so that you can start to put in every single point of your campaign. And the answer might still be no at the end, but you've had an opportunity to advocate for yourself in a really powerful way. So those are 2 tips for me. Take them or leave them. I'm going to get back to these questions because they're really rich and I want to be able to answer them. So this one is not so much about fundraising for the campaign, but more about this whole financial aspect of running for office, which I think is really valid. They mentioned what was already shared, that New Mexico state representatives are not paid. And so how do we manage this? And is this a discriminatory bar to women running for office? So Georgene, you brought this up actually in your opening remarks. You want to talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, I mentioned earlier, we don't get paid. It's a big sacrifice. But if I knew when I was making the decision about whether or not to run, I knew that if I didn't do it, then someone who was in a better position than me would do it. And when I was looking at the people that were sitting in the legislature at that time, they were older, they were wealthier. So, so if we want to have our legislature reflect people that are wealthy and retired, we can do that if we're not going to sacrifice. But for me, having my experience, having my education, having my voice be there in the legislature was so important. Then I knew that I would have to make that sacrifice because I wanted our legislature to look like us and reflect the people that we serve. So it's a difficult balance, but it can be done. You have to find the right employer that will work with you and being able to take the time off. This year it was a 60-day session. Next year it'll be a 30-day session. So really just working around that schedule and the interim committees. But again, in order to have the legislature look like the people we serve, then we need people in our positions to step up and be able to make that sacrifice. And a lot of it is, our families also have to make that sacrifice too. But I think in the long term, when we're able to provide our voice there, then it's going to pay off.
Absolutely. And I just want to underscore what you shared, that we're entitled to have representative governments that look like us. We're entitled to have our voices considered, heard, spoken about in legislative bodies. And also that second point, that there are employers who are willing to help you navigate this schedule. There are ways to both have a job so that you can provide for your family and be someone who serves an elected office. I'm not going to say that that is an absolute opportunity for every single person, but I do think that there are creative and possible ways to make it happen, and that asking the questions and hearing that someone else has done it is a great way to get started. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been so adamant about this network that you're building in the chat. Talk with one another, share ideas. If someone else has done it, in addition to what we've heard here, share that story. We have a couple other stories that you can look through other webinars we've done. This is not the first time we've heard this. It is not impossible. And I hope that you will seek out that opportunity. For this next question, I'm actually going to bring back both of you. I want you both to answer this because it goes back to that second question I asked about how do you broaden your community? How do you broaden your network? And so you both mentioned that, there's people who will introduce you, like the network kind of continues to grow as you meet more people. But this question is specifically, how do you identify and target groups that would be supportive of your policies? Where do you go about finding them, especially when you are spending all this other time and energy at the campaign at large? So is there a specific way that either of you or both of you did that? We'll start with you, Tessa.
Thank you. Honestly, it really did help for me to have a experienced and locally connected campaign manager because they were already knew some of the key players, but also key organizations as well. And most of these organizations during campaign times, they have forums. They want to hear from all the candidates and to see what policies or interests that they might have. And so, whatever the topic is that you're interested in, there's usually an organization and usually a local chapter that you can look into. So if you know of a national organization that you love and support, I would say, in that you can just look up on the internet these days to see and find out about those local chapters. And you can get involved early on, even before you're ready to make that final step in running, to introduce yourself to these organizations even before and kind of just participate, even if you are just sitting back and watching this, which I did for quite a while. I was just a viewer and participant, gathering all that information for a bit.
Excellent, thank you. And then Georgene, anything that you would add?
So once you're in public office, you are going to have so many opportunities to meet so many people, not just in, like my position as a state legislator, but also in going to conferences nationally and being part of national organizations. So now that you're in this position, you're constantly meeting new people that share your ideas and share the work that you want to do with policy. So really just collecting their information too. And again, just being open to meeting new people, to having conversations with different organizations and groups. You'll find that there are so many people that you can reach out to for help. And yeah, that's what happens once you're in office. You just meet a ton of people, which is pretty nice.
100%. I am going to go ahead and pick on a couple things. One, I cannot overstate the importance of a campaign manager. So many of the women who come to She Should Run talk about like, okay, I need to know exactly how to do all the nuts and bolts and all the specifics of a campaign. And I need to know how to be a treasurer. And I need to know how to be an all-star volunteer. If you're the candidate, your job is to be the candidate and to surround yourself with a team of people who can be the experts for these other components and manage that for you. You are not responsible for being the expert on every single thing of your campaign. You're responsible for being the expert on being the candidate and setting that vision, setting that tone, and moving forward in the leader in that capacity. And then bringing in people who can be the logistics and support staff to get your campaign rolling. Because at the end of the day, you are running so that you can serve in office, so that you can have this great impact once you're there. The campaign is the vehicle to get you there. So let's make sure you've got a great team, but your job is to be that candidate who is then the elected official, and to prepare yourself to be the most effective elected official that you can. I'm not surprised to see this, but there are quite a few more of these tactical questions. I want to make sure that we are kind of hitting all of them, and we're moving towards our last couple of questions here. But this one is, are there any specific resources for beginning your plan for how much fundraising you need to do, how to handle that money, and budgeting on campaign initiatives? This person shares, I don't know how to get started. I'm really just curious, how do we do it? So do either of you feel particularly strongly about wanting to answer that question? I'm seeing some nods from both of you.
I can start. You definitely have to look at the position that you're running for. A lot of the campaign finance information is publicly available. So you can take a look at those reports and see, how much people paid for their campaign managers, how much they paid for printing services, and really the total amount that folks have ran in similar races, so that you can get an idea of how much you'll need. So again, it's all public information. You can probably Google it to figure out where you need to go. If not, then just ask someone that's in office, like, how much did it take to run your race? And what do you think I should be prepared for? It's also going to depend on whether the district is very competitive too. So those do tend to be larger financed campaign races. So first step, or maybe the first step might even be to ask someone, how much did it cost you to run your race, and then looking at those reports. But there's a lot of information out there. So just don't be afraid to ask, and people will share that information with you.
Excellent. So I want to make sure I give you both time for closing remarks. So this will be our last question. But to all of you out there, there are tons of resources. There's also the She Should Run community. If you want to continue this conversation, there are plenty of opportunities to do so. I know that there are questions that have gone unanswered here today, but we are continuously using this information to build you greater resources. So know that these questions, if they're not answered today, there are lots of opportunities to get them answered within She Should Run. So our last question before we move to closing remarks is, without surprise, how do you find a good campaign manager? Tessa, you shared a little bit about you'd met someone before and you wanted them to be your campaign manager, but what are the qualities you're looking for? Maybe the past experience. Where do you go to meet this person? It's almost like, people who are trying to find a good partner in the dating world and they want to know all the specifics. People want to know what are all the specifics? Where do I go to find my dream campaign manager?
That is a very good question, and it can be a very hard one. My situation perhaps is unique, perhaps isn't, but like I said, I was just participating in my community when a person connected with our local political organization found me. And when they did, we had this conversation and built a relationship. And from there, I got introduced to different people. And when I became a campaign treasurer, this individual also had a campaign manager. And so because we have to work together very closely, your manager and your treasurer, I developed a relationship with them. And I always say, when you're looking for a campaign manager, make sure it is somebody who has the same values as you as well. And ethics are super important to myself. I have very strong opinions about certain items, and I always want to have really great transparency. And so I want to make sure that whoever is part of my team also represents those values, because they are also a reflection of the policies and what I'll bring to our city council. And so I was very deliberate. So we had lots of good conversations, always talk and basically interview the person and make sure you're a good fit together and that you both want to bring a certain vision together with everything. And I know it touches a little bit previously on a different question, but for municipalities, or counties, it's very hard to get information sometimes to figure out, finances. So looking at your county clerk's office and your Secretary of State sites are very important to get a good game plan going, and having really strong communication with your campaign manager at the beginning to look at what the realistic run is going to look like for you will be super important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then Georgene, anything you would add about how to find the ideal campaign manager or where to find the ideal campaign manager?
No, I think Tessa covered it well. I mean, and if all else fails, just ask around, put it on Facebook. Do you guys know any campaign managers that are good, that are interested in, if it's conservative policies, progressive policies, whatever that may be. So just, don't be afraid to ask.
Absolutely. I think social media is a really wonderful tool, and we've talked a little bit about it today. I will also say, in addition to Facebook or Instagram, the She Should Run community is full of women who are also thinking about politics. We have different state groups. You can go on there and say, hey, I know a lot of us are thinking about running for office. Maybe some of us decided we'd rather be campaign managers, or maybe some of us know. I think that utilizing the She Should Run community is also a great resource at your disposal to start doing that investigative work. So huge thank you to both of you. I'm going to give you a chance to just give closing remarks, final advice that you would like these women to know, anything else about your own experience as an elected official that you think has been really impactful or worthwhile. Because we started Tessa and then Georgene, we'll go backwards the other way. So Georgene, we'll hear from you first, and then Tessa.
So thanks again to everyone for tuning in. I just didn't really think about running for office so early in life. And I think it comes with both advantages and disadvantages. But, when you think about it as a whole, I'm super glad that I did it. I really feel that I've been able to be an effective legislator. And I know that, if you put your mind to it, if you surround yourself with people that can be supportive of what you want to do, then you'll be able to do it. We all have different kind of obstacles that we have to deal with. So asking for help isn't anything to be fearful of. And really, I just know that if you put yourself out there and you tell people that this is something that you want to do, they will support you. So I encourage, each and every one of you, if you're interested, please look into it more. Please talk to people who have done it, successful or not. We all have different stories to share. So I know that, different people bring different experiences and skills and values to the table. So that's something that we should have. I'm a huge believer in representation matters. So I hope that folks do put themselves out there and make a good run for office. And I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Georgene. And Representative Lewis. Also,
Councilwoman
Abeyta-Stuve. We'll hear from you before we head out.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for having us. The one big thing that I always say is your voice matters, your story matters. And without them, we're missing vital components when crafting legislation, making decisions. I know at the municipal level, it gets down to kind of the nuts and bolts of what your home is, even it's roads, it's streets, it's everything. And it's so important to have everybody's lived experiences in those communities being brought forward so we can craft the best possible way forward. And so I definitely encourage everybody, please run, seek things out, but also take your time to make sure that you are looking at all the details. I am a detail-oriented person. Don't let it stop you at all, but make sure that you are looking into that so that you are giving yourself also the best chance for success. It does take a lot of coordination, and you can do it. We can do hard things. But it's really great to be able to see a community come together. And I know that mine did in a way I wasn't even expecting to, because you are bringing something very unique, as I did with my own community. So I definitely encourage everybody to continue those conversations and to continue those connections.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Those of you online, please don't leave. We have a very short evaluation that if you could just take a moment to fulfill, we would be so grateful. Your feedback is how we make things like this happen. So please just take 3 minutes to fill out that survey. To Representative Lewis, to Councilwoman Abeyta-Stuve, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your stories, your advice, your intel, your highs and lows. This has been one of the most inspiring events I've been a part of. I know it's been so for the women in the chat today. I've been watching them congratulate and thank and laud all the things that you've shared. We are so fortunate to hear from all of you. If you would like to know more from She Should Run, we are doing a webinar on April 21st about how to run for office if you have debt. And also the next Road to Run will focus on communications and doing your story and your brand. So we hope to see you at future events. Thank you all for being here, and we hope you have a lovely afternoon.